All right, so now that we've added an endpoint for sharing notes, the next thing that we're going to do is convert our front end to actually do that. So let's open up our notes provider here. And the logic inside our share note function is going to just have to be rewritten a little bit to make a request to the server instead of just doing all of the logic inside of here. We are still going to use a bulk of this logic. We're going to use the map thing here to make sure we update the correct note, but we are going to update this part here. We're just going to remove that and set it to the updated emails that we're getting back from the server endpoint. So in order to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to say try. We're going to put all of this in a try catch block just to make sure. And we're going to say const updated emails equals await, and we're making a post request here to the endpoint we just created, which is going to be slash notes slash, and then we're going to insert the note ID, and we're going to say slash shared emails. Okay, so that is our basic request there. And let's actually change this here because there might come a time when we don't want this to be emails. So just to make this easier, we're going to call this property shared with. So we're just going to say update shared with to the updated emails. And that should be all we need there. So let's add a catch block now. And remember that this catch block could catch errors where the email doesn't actually exist. So currently, there's not really a good way for our user interface to get this error, and that's something that we'll look at later on. So just don't worry about it too much right now. We're going to say catch, and here for now, we'll just log out the error. Okay, kind of a useless response there, but we're just going to do that for now. Okay, so one more thing we need to do here actually is we need to include the email that the user is sharing this note with in the request body of our post request. So we're just going to pass email like that, and that should allow us to get that email inside our server endpoint. All right, and that should allow us to update a note in our server. So let's test this thing out. And actually, I'm going to just find shared with emails and replace those. So actually, we just need to say shared with, and we'll change this to shared with .filter. And shared with emails should be shared with instead. And that's all we should need to do. So let's test this thing again. It looks like everything is compiling successfully. Right, we were getting a syntax error when we didn't have a catch block, but other than that, everything's looking good. So let's give this thing a try. We're going to open up one of our notes. We're going to click on share. And let's try adding some emails for this. So actually, let's take a look and see what accounts our application actually has. We're going to open up a Mongo shell by saying Mongo, and we're going to use our note sharing DB, and we'll say db.users.findall.pretty. Oh, that's because we called it Notes App DB, not Note Sharing DB. Let's change that back, Notes App DB. And the same query will give us some of the users in our application. So we have John, we have Jane, we have John Tube, we have Jim. A lot of J's there, so let's, I don't know, let's just pick jane@gmail.com. And that should work out nicely. We're going to say jane@gmail.com, and we'll click on share. And it looks like nothing's happening. So let's see what happened to that request. We're going to open this up. We'll try and do it again, I suppose. Actually, let's just refresh this to make sure. Oh, it looks like it was added. So something might just be wrong with our logic when we're actually making that request. So let's open our notes provider up again and take a look at what's going on in here. So we should be getting the updated emails back from the server endpoint. So let's open up our share note route again. I see what's going on. When we do find one and update, we need to include that return document after option, as you may remember from before. So we're just going to add that here. Basically, what was happening is we were getting the document returned before we modified it. Now, honestly, I don't know why anyone would really want to do that, like to get the previous document before updating it. I've never had to anyway, but who knows? We just need to remember to add return document after here, and that should make everything work the way we want it to. So let's give this another try. We've already shared it with jane@gmail.com, so let's try jim@gmail.com and click on share. And sure enough, jim@gmail.com gets added to this list here. And that actually reminds me that another thing we want to make sure of in this list is that the user doesn't add their own email address to the sharing settings. Not that there's anything that would really go wrong with that, but it's just kind of a cleanliness thing for our data. We don't want to, we don't want data that doesn't belong there being in our database. So the way that we're going to add that is in our share note route. We're just going to get the user's ID that's making this request, or the user's email that's making this request, rather. And the way we can do that is by saying const user, let's say auth user here, equals request.user. Remember that we're getting this from our verify auth token middleware. And then what we're going to do is, before we actually make this request and find the user with the email, we're just going to check to see if the auth user's email matches this email property in the body. So we'll say if auth user.email is equal to email. Then what we're going to do is send back a status code, and there's a few that we could use in this case, but I'm going to use 409, which stands for conflict. So basically there's just a conflict between the data that a user is sending to the server and the data that's already on the server. So we'll just say send status 409, and that'll just throw a corresponding error. We might want to add a message here like we did down here just to explain it, but for now that's not really necessary. So anyway, I don't really even remember what user was logged in here, and now that I think about it, that could be a good opportunity to add the currently logged in user to the navbar. So real quickly, this is going to be easy to do. We're just going to say navbar. We're going to use the use user hook here to get the currently logged in user. So we'll just import that up here. We'll say import use user from our hooks. And then down here, we're going to say const is loading and user equals use user. Okay, so now that we've done that, what we're going to do is right next to our logout button here, we're going to display a paragraph tag with the user's email inside of it if that user exists. So we're going to say user.email. And of course, we're only going to show that if the user exists, right? So we'll say, we'll say if is loading. Then what we'll do is display a loading message in this spot. There we go. Otherwise, we'll display the user's email, but we want to make sure that that exists first. So what we'll do for that is we'll just say, here, let's just indent this so it's a little bit more apparent what's going on. What we're going to do is just say is loading. And then if it's not loading, we'll check if the user exists. And that'll be another ternary operator here. You can tell I like nested ternary operators. Otherwise, what we're going to do is just display nothing. Okay, so that'll display loading. If it's loading, it'll display the user's email if there is a user email, and it will display nothing if it's not loading and the user isn't logged in. And here, let's just add logged in as the text here, and let's see what that looks like. So we're going to go back here. We see logged in as john@gmail.com, and if we try this out now, we're going to say john@gmail.com, click share. And that's actually going to give us an error if we take a look in the network tab here. Let's try it again. @gmail.com, click share. We see that we're getting a 409 status code back, and we see that that error is actually being logged out here. So request failed with status code 409. Awesome. So one more thing, let's just restyle this a little bit. What we're going to do is open up our index.css file and change our navbar styling just a little bit. Actually, what we can do is just wrap these in a span, or a div probably, so let's give that a try and see what that looks like. Okay, so we'll say span, and actually that should be below the logout button. Okay, so let's just indent these, because those should both be inside the span, and now we just need to change the styling of this a little bit. All we need to do is for our span inside the nav, we're going to, the sloppy way of doing this, which is what I'm going to do, is say nav span. And for this one, we'll just say display flex. And that should display the email and the button right next to each other. And if we want that centered vertically, we can just say align items center. And that should line them up nicely. And let's just add a little bit of space between them. To do that, we can just say something like nav paragraph, I suppose. So we'll just say a paragraph inside a nav. We'll just add a margin to that. So we'll say margin right, and that should be something like 8 pics. All right, if you want to go through and add your own class names and stuff, feel free to do that, but that gives us that nice spacing. Actually, let's do a little bit more. We'll do something like 16 pics. Okay, so 16 pics. And there we go. All right, cool. So we know who we're logged in as now, and we've also seen how to share a note with different people via the sharing settings page. So I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.